So in this chapter, we really get some nice in-depth explanation as to sky battles and how some of these dials actually function and work amongst the Skypians. One Piece, Chapter 257, Dial Battle. Are they battling with soap? Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you another review on the awesome and adventure-filled tale of One Piece. The last chapter really saw everything being the action being taken away from the Straw Hats, and really kind of saw the Shandians and ultimately Wiper prevailing with this presumed to be reject dial that he used on Shura and knocked him the funk out. So that is how the chapter ended, and that's really kind of where things pick up over here. We did have a flashback with Ganfal and their kind of proposed meeting in the last chapter. The beginning portion of this chapter, though, does pick up actually, Ganfal is still talking to Usopp and Sanji and, of course, Nami on the Going Merry and kind of explaining the history of the Shandians, Skypiea, the whole thing about Verth, everything else. And it's really kind of neat because he goes and he shows them, it goes to show just how little they actually know about this whole world that's up here. And we knew that the dials were an integral part of just kind of everyday civilization, but he actually explains and kind of shows them, which is really neat, how things work. Because he talks about, he says, listen, I was really just kind of helping you guys, just really more out of the fact that I felt bad for you because you really had no chance. People from the Blue Sea have no chance in a sky battle. And they're like, what? A sky battle? What the hell is that? So he goes and he says he puts this shell on a barrel, and Sanji's got this giant hammer, and he goes and he says, well, hit that as hard as you possibly can, and Usopp's yelling at him, don't you dare, you put a hole in my deck, the deck of the shell, I'm gonna kick your ass. So Sanji goes and when he hits this thing as hard as he can, right, and nothing happens, and then Usopp's like, that was pathetic, like you didn't even break the empty barrel beneath it, what the hell is your deal, So then Ganfal goes and he says, now flip the shell over and basically just press on the back of it, right? So he flips it over, press on the back of it, and just like an explosion, the whole barrel just blows up, disintegrates. Everybody's kind of blown back, And Sanji's like, you damn old coot, But he winds up explaining to them that is an impact dial. It can absorb any amount of force that you put into it, and then you can release it obviously when you need to. So that we go and we see is what Wiper used, and that's why. And he says oftentimes it's bandaged or taped like to a user's hand, and then they can of course use that and something like that can pretty much kill a human or even an above average human. You know what I mean? It's pretty deadly. So we know obviously that's why Wiper's arm was wrapped then. And he had that impact dial. Then he goes on to explain that there's something called a reject dial, which obviously we know from what Wiper said. Reject, that's what he had. And that's 10 times more powerful than the impact dial. But the thing about that, though, the downside of that is that it's so dangerous it can actually kill the user of it, So I thought it was pretty cool, the explanation part. And for me, that was really the high point of the chapter, was explaining this, because all these various dials, and he was explaining about how, you can take a fire dial and put it in a bird's mouth, and now all of a sudden you've got this flying, fire-breathing bird, or you can take basically you can make a fire lance, taking a flame dial and adding it to. So he explains all the different uses for it, and people that are, of course, not from from Skypiea do not know how to utilize those different type of dials, and oftentimes can't even recognize what they're actually up against. And then they go and they kind of put two and two together, and okay, yeah, Fatty McFattikins over there, the round bally guy, Satori, that's what he must have used, because when he was talking about, it's just, just simple, it's just pure impact or something like that, So he was obviously using an impact dial and being able to, and it's kind of neat though to think about that, because you can take a normal person and really make them superhuman if given the right type of combination of dials. So it's really almost like, like a superhero juice in a jar, Very cool stuff, I thought. The chapter then kind of goes and splits off in a couple of different directions. It goes back to the Shandians themselves, and of course they're going to go, now Shura has been defeated, and they're like, Wiper, why would you use a reject dial? That's crazy. One more use of that, it'll kill you, And he just is like, oh yeah, well, that's commitment, isn't it? And it's just God, it's that block-headed single mind. Really? You're the leader of these people, and if you wind up getting yourself killed, what's going to happen to them? You know what I mean? A lot of times when you go and take out the general, the army goes and scatters, flees, winds up getting captured, killed. You know, and this guy has no care for his own life whatsoever because he's going to take it next level, bro. And I don't know. I can't. I can appreciate the attitude, I guess, but I can't. You know what I mean? And we wind up seeing too, Kamakiri. She didn't go with. She's over there picking up the Verth, and she's gonna go back and bring it to Isa, I guess. And she's just like, you know what? I'm not willing to go and keep pushing on and leaving my my friends, family, comrades falling behind. You know, she's not willing to make that sacrifice. So. Anyways, they wind up, the Shandians go to split off. Brahm and a couple other, they're like, we can't all get caught in the same trap. Now, obviously, there's 2 priests down, but there's still 2 left, blah, 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 this and that. So, then we wind up going and they, as they go and kind of break off, they actually get surprised by one of those heavenly warriors, because we see at one point, that big guy, Yama or whatever, the big Humpty Dumpty looking dude that looks like he had sex with Igaram's mom. And, he's just he's a portly dude. He's got all the heavenly warriors, the 50 elite guards of Enel around him. So, and I also forgot to mention, too, that he talked briefly when they were on the ship and he was explaining everything about the impact dials. Ganfal did go into briefly what he knew about mantra. And the whole thing about mantra is that it's almost like and I know I've compared some different powers like this before, but it is almost like a Star Wars The Force type of thing. It's being able to kind of hear the different things around you and see things, and basically depending on how strong your mantra is, and Ganfal explained it like you're born with it, but he says that the priests, they basically can kind of like hear and see everything that's going on in the upper yard there, and it also allows them, obviously, depending on their strength and range, to be able to kind of see things coming, before they happen. Enel, though, his area is all of Skypiea, so I don't know if it has something to do with the transmission of, they say that a lot of times through like radio waves as well as like electricity, that there is a lot of different energy that can be stored. There's a number of different things if you go and you Google it and you look it up, and I don't want to get too heavy into a scientific lesson over here, but I don't know if maybe I'm thinking because the couple times we've seen Enel's power come down, it appears to be some kind of crazy, huge like lightning storm, if maybe that has something to do with it being up in the clouds, and maybe that amplifies his sense of things or whatever, because he seems to be like electric based or something. Again, just kind of spitballing here, but that's just what I was kind of putting 2 and 2 and hoping to come up with 4 with. Anyways, so we get that whole thing, and some of the warriors wind up getting blindsided. One of them does, and we wind up seeing this one of these heavenly warriors has one of the Shandian warriors gets blindsided by a heavenly warrior, and the heavenly warrior is going to take him out, and he's got this axe dial, this splitting axe dial. So it's kind of cool. He cuts right through his shield and everything else, and after he takes out another one of them, and it is pretty neat just to see the different dials, and that's really what the illustration is there for. Then we go and we flip on to we finally get back to some of the Straw Hats, Luffy in particular. And Luffy's just kind of walking around. He's like, the island to the south, my head is empty, and I'm a fool. And he's like singing this song to himself, and I'm just like, okay. And he hears bah, and that was the same noise that was heard before the Heavenly Warriors attacked the Shandians or whatever. So obviously you think if you're reading, you're like, oh, it's coming, right? And Luffy's gonna get blindsided, and Luffy's walking. He's like, oh, a goat, cool, and he's thinking, and then all of a sudden it's cool because it looks like you see this picture of like this Heavenly Warrior going to like jump down and blindside Luffy, right? And Luffy just straight up like just goes and just jacks him the fuck up, man. And he's just like, and then afterwards Luffy's like, oh, what a disappointment. I thought there was a goat. I thought I was going to get to see a goat. Just like, this is great, So then he's like, da-da-da-da, island in the north, my head is empty, and I'm a fool, And then the chapter ends, though, with him going and standing up on a tree branch, him seeing Wiper. And Wiper's, of course, a little bit worse for wear, a little bit bloodied and beaten over there. And he's just like, he's got a stogie hanging out of his mouth or a cigarette, and he's kind of like a cross between Smoker and Sanji, So apparently, it's like, I'm an American Indian looking dude, but, I'm smoking some, pack of Marlboros. Anyway, he's just like, what are you doing here, So that's how the chapter ends with them. My chapter question chapter question though is, and I did ask something similar about 20 chapters ago when we first were introduced to like the wave dials, the wind dials, all the dial power thing. What are your thoughts on, because Ganfal even says, he goes, even though, because Nami's like, well, aren't these things used for like to keep things running? And he's like, yeah, that's but it's just human nature to go and take things that can be perceived as or turned into weapons and make them into weapons, right? I mean, you think about it, and that completely ties into real life too, because how many times do we take something and all of a sudden it's like we make some kind of death machine or something that can deliver destruction and death and evil and harm and hurt to other people, and it's like, oh yeah, well, it actually started out as an experiment on this, on how to make better food something, and you're like, oh my god, okay, and now you guys have like a deadly poison that can wipe out a country. So anyway, it's funny how they explain that, and you see the parallels to real life, is that yes, the majority of people use these things for everyday household use. However, there is those select few that find these negative ways to use them to harm others. So my question though still remains: what are your thoughts on the formidable amount of different types of, I guess you would say, attack dials that you can use to kind of augment your powers, even if you were just a normal everyday person like me or you? Leave your answer to that question in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching all of you in the next one, nation. I'd like to nominate, see what I did there with that? Anyway, for best breasts. Just please don't tell my wife.